Now that we've understood the basics of semi-solid dosage forms, we're going to talk about ointments. It's the most content-heavy type of semi-solid dosage form, so that's why we're going to tackle it first. This is the outline. We're going to talk about what ointments are, physicochemical properties of an ideal ointment base, classification of ointment bases. We have 4 main types: oleaginous bases, absorption bases, water-removable bases, and water-soluble bases. Then we're going to talk about methods of preparing ointments, quality control tests of ointments, and compendial requirements for ointments. We're going to cover ointments as a topic in 3 videos. In this video, we're going to cover these 3 points, and we're going to begin with the first type of ointment base, which is oleaginous bases. In the second video, we are going to continue and complete the types of ointment bases, and in the third video, we're going to talk about these 3. Right, so what are ointments? Ointments are semi-solid preparations intended for external application on the skin and mucous membranes. Any ointment is composed of the ointment base and or either active constituents or excipients. But it's important that we understand that the majority of ointments is ointment base. And therefore, it is important that we understand the types of ointment bases really well. That's why we're going to spend a really long time talking about ointment bases, beginning with this video. Right. Ointments are generally diluted as half the preparation is composed of the base. As I said, the majority of the ointment is composed of the base, and therefore, even if we were to add active constituents or excipients, the preparation would still generally be considered diluted. Ointments can be used for their physical properties if they are unmedicated, such as skin protectants, lubricants, and emollients, or as a vehicle if the ointment is medicated. And depending on the type of active constituent that we incorporate into the base, our ointment can serve several therapeutic effects. So we can use it for several skin conditions depending on the active constituent that we incorporate into the base. So when we come to manufacture our ointment, what are the properties that make an ointment base ideal? It goes without saying that the ointment base should be non-irritating to the skin. It should be easily removable. And when I say easily removable, I mean that it can be washed off with water, either partly or completely. If I were to take water and I attempted to wash off the ointment base, it would reasonably be washed off. That's what I mean by easily removable. The ointment base should not leave a stain on the skin, and it should be stable. Stable meaning that it should not react adversely, or it should not react entirely with my skin, and it also should not react with the active constituent if there are active constituents incorporated into the ointment base. Our ointment base should be pH independent. What does that mean? We previously established that our drug must be in its unionized form. If it is placed in a base which can readily change its pH, the degree of ionization of the drug changes, and this is undesirable as we want to preserve it in a certain form, which is the unionized form, and we want to keep it that way always. Therefore, our ointment base should be pH independent. The ointment base should melt at body temperature so that it can easily spread on the skin without causing lesions due to friction upon application. When I apply the ointment base to my skin, it shouldn't cause any adverse wounds or lesions due to the friction that is formed or produced upon application. It should be smooth and soft on the skin. And the greater the surface area of the skin exposed to the drug, the greater the absorption and penetration. Remember from Fick's law. The base should easily release the drug, as the drug should partition itself more towards the skin. Finally, The base should be widely compatible with a variety of active constituents. As I said, it shouldn't react with them. It should only be compatible with them. And it should be compatible with them also to ensure easy mixing and also to avoid phase separation. So this is the classification of ointment bases. We have 4 main types: oleaginous, absorption, water removable, and water soluble. Under oleaginous, we have paraffins, Plastibase, lard, vegetable oils, and silicon. And under paraffins, we have petrolatum and white petrolatum, and these two are semi-solid hydrocarbons. Under absorption, we have emulsifiable and emulsified, and under emulsifiable, we have anhydrous lanolin and hydrophilic petrolatum. Under emulsified, we have hydrous lanolin and cold cream. We are going to first begin with oleaginous bases. Before we begin talking about oleaginous bases, we need to understand the general properties. First, it is water-free. That means it cannot absorb water, it is insoluble in water, and it is immiscible with water. It basically hates water since it's composed of 100% fatty substances and is greasy, as we can see in the diagram here. And therefore, aqueous drugs are incorporated into oleaginous bases in small quantities and with great difficulty. The truth is that it is practically impossible to incorporate an aqueous drug into an oleaginous base because for us to prepare a medicated ointment, there needs to be a sufficient quantity of the active constituent, which is impossible to accomplish here. And what kind of preparation will be effective with tiny quantities of our therapeutic component, right? So I needed to write down this sentence to give you the correct and complete picture, but I want you to take from this that we cannot incorporate aqueous drugs into oleaginous bases. Our oleaginous base should adhere very well to the skin for long periods of time without drying out in order to give sufficient time for the drug to be absorbed and exert its maximum therapeutic effects. And finally, it should act as an occluding agent and emollient. Okay, this is a very important concept. Oleaginous bases trap the water content in the skin. We said that since they are fatty, fats hate water, and therefore they neither absorb nor dissolve in water. For us to say this, we are implying that the skin has water content. Okay, let's elaborate on this point a bit more. In previous videos, we established that the stratum corneum of the skin is composed mostly of lipids and a lesser amount of water content. That means that normal, healthy skin contains water. Okay, for us to moisturize and maintain the health of our skin, we should preserve the composition of the stratum corneum, right? So we need to trap the water in the skin to maintain healthy skin. What is the best way to do this? By using an occluding agent such as oleaginous bases. Okay, so if we talked further on this, and I told you that there is a patient with dry skin, would you prescribe for them an ointment with an oleaginous base? Pause the video here and think about it for a minute. The answer is no. Never, ever, ever. Why? The problem with a patient with dry skin is that they have a deficiency of moisture in their skin. If you as a pharmacist prescribed for them an ointment with an oleaginous base, you would be worsening their condition. So the solution is to give them a hydrating agent first, to replenish the skin's water content, and then to apply an oleaginous base ointment after the skin regains its healthy state to keep the skin healthy. Right, so now that we've understood the general properties of oleaginous bases, we have 5 types of oleaginous bases we're going to discuss: paraffins, Plastibase, lards, vegetable oils, and silicon. And we are going to begin with paraffins. Under paraffins, we have two types of semi-solid paraffins, petrolatum and white petrolatum. There are actually three types of paraffins. We have semi-solid, solid, and liquid paraffins. But the only paraffins that can be used completely as ointment bases are semi-solid hydrocarbons. And there are two types, petrolatum and white petrolatum. Let's begin with petrolatum. Petrolatum is obtained from petroleum. It has a yellow to light amber color, and its melting point is between 38 degrees Celsius and 56 degrees Celsius. And this is very important to know as it will help us determine the storage temperature under which we store our ointment. And therefore, it can ultimately help us understand the storage conditions needed to keep our ointment stable. Other names for petrolatum are yellow petrolatum, petroleum jelly, and the most common commercially is Vaseline. So petrolatum is also called soft paraffin, yellow petrolatum, petroleum jelly, and Vaseline. White petrolatum is decolorized petrolatum. So it's basically petrolatum, but with its color removed. And this provides two benefits. First, it ensures patient compliance. Would you, as a consumer, prefer to apply yellow Vaseline or white Vaseline to your skin? You would prefer white Vaseline since it's more visually appealing, hence increasing patient compliance. Patient compliance is a very important concept in pharmacy. If we manufacture the perfect drug, but our patient doesn't take it for whatever reason, then we as pharmacists are lacking in a very important area, since we wouldn't be able to treat the patient and we wouldn't be able to increase their quality of life. So patient compliance is very, very important. The second benefit that decolorized petrolatum provides is that it allows even distribution and incorporation of colored active constituents onto a white base. When we come to incorporate our drug or our colored drug against a white background, which is the base, this ensures that we are incorporating an accurate dose of the drug, and therefore it also ensures that we give the patient the accurate dose for application onto the skin. White petrolatum is used in treatment of diaper rash and dry skin, and other names are white petrolatum jelly, white Vaseline, and bleached Vaseline. There are other types of paraffins that are not typically classified as complete oleaginous bases, but can be added onto the base to aid in a certain function. For example, what if after incorporation of the drug into the ointment base, the ointment loses its semi-solid consistency? What if it's too solid or too liquid? That would ruin our ointment. So we need to add substances like liquid paraffin, which is a mixture of liquid hydrocarbons, or hard paraffin, which is a mixture of solid hydrocarbons. Let's start with liquid paraffin. Another name for liquid paraffin is mineral oil. It can act either as a levigating agent or as a softening agent. As a levigating agent, it has two functions, or its role varies depending on the type of drug it is mixed with, whether our drug is an insoluble powder or a liquid drug. If our drug is an insoluble powder like zinc oxide or salicylic acid, and we wanted to incorporate it into our ointment base, we can't just proceed to doing so without first reducing the drug particle size. Our aim is to obtain a smooth preparation at the end of the day, so we need to grind the drug particles by moistening them with a levigating agent such as liquid paraffin. So we levigate the insoluble powder to reduce the particle size by moistening them. We also ensure that the powders are evenly distributed within the ointment base, And this is what the levitation process looks like after we have finished levigating the insoluble powder. Look, it has a very smooth, soft consistency, and this is the aim. We also need to ensure that an accurate dose is being incorporated into our base. And this is a very important concept because, in general, it's difficult to deal with powders. Why? Because, as you can see from this diagram, this is what happens. And consequently, we would lose a significant amount of our drug. So, in order to prevent this from happening, we need to levigate the powder first and then incorporate it into our base. Right. If our drug is a liquid, we need to add liquid paraffin in order to increase its viscosity so that it can be more easily incorporated into the ointment base. We can also use liquid paraffin as a softening agent in case our drug is a very viscous liquid or a solid component, again, to ensure that we prepare a smooth and spreadable ointment. So, now that we've finished talking about liquid paraffin, let's talk about hard paraffin. From its name, hard paraffin is used as a stiffening agent in the case that our drug is too fluid. It is congealed between 47 degrees Celsius and 65 degrees Celsius. Congeal means that we change the consistency of the preparation from fluid to solid, as the aim is to solidify the viscous liquid to a degree sufficient enough to obtain a semi-solid consistency, and it softens at 38 degrees Celsius. Last point I want to mention here. What if I were to enter the lab and they told me to prepare an ointment using a semi-solid base, but the only materials I have in front of me are liquid paraffin and hard paraffin? What would I do? Well, I don't have the semi-solid base, so I can't proceed, right? Wrong. As pharmacists, we make anything work out. So in this case, the answer is simply to add liquid paraffin onto hard paraffin to create our semi-solid base, of course in specific quantities, and then we can proceed to add the active constituent if we're preparing a medicated ointment. So we finished talking about paraffins. Now we're going to move on to plastibases, lards, vegetable oils, and silicons. Don't worry, these bases won't take long to cover. The second type is Plastibase, also known as gelene. It is a mixture of liquid paraffin gelled with high molecular weight hydrocarbon wax. So Plastibase equals liquid paraffin plus high molecular weight hydrocarbon wax. And remember this piece of information because we're going to need it in a few seconds. And plastibases have a jelly-like consistency. Plastibases have several advantages, but the greatest advantage that it has is that it maintains its consistency over a wide range of temperatures. See, from 15 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees Celsius. And this is amazing because it increases the stability of both the base and the active constituent in the preparation. It also allows us to work with a wide storage condition, so we're more flexible with the storage conditions at which we store our ointment, and we're not dealing with a strict or constricted temperature range. And also, it is compatible and spreadable on the skin. Second of all, plastibases release the active constituent faster than petrolatum, and therefore the active constituent is absorbed faster and exerts its therapeutic effect faster. It is compatible with most medicaments, and this is amazing because remember when we talked about the ideal properties of an ideal ointment base? This was one of them, and this is very important. And also, it gives a visually appealing ointment. Like, look at this picture here. Plastibases are white, they're smooth, they have a visually appealing ointment, and therefore they can also increase patient compliance. There are two disadvantages when we talk about plastibases though. We established that plastibases are compatible with most medicaments, but there are three exceptions. If plastibase is used as the vehicle for menthol, camphor, or salicylates, these three active constituents will interact with the hydrocarbon wax in the plastibase. Remember, we said that one of the components of plastibases was high molecular weight hydrocarbon wax. So these three active constituents will interact with it, and this interaction makes the preparation unstable, and the result is that the ointment loses its semi-solid consistency and instead becomes a viscous liquid. Therefore, if we want to use plastibases as our ointment base, we need to keep this in mind. Plastibases cannot be prepared by fusion. Fusion is one of the methods we can use to prepare an ointment where the components are melted in order from the highest melting point to the lowest melting point, and then stirred gently and cooled over time. We're going to cover this more in the third video on ointments, but basically this method doesn't work for plastibases as it would lose its semi-solid consistency, again forming a viscous liquid instead. So the solution to this is to follow the exact same steps as we normally would in fusion, but when we come to cool, we do the shock cooling procedure, where very rapid cooling occurs. This will give us the semi-solid consistency that we are aiming for. Last, we have lards, vegetable oils, and silicons. Lards are liable to oxidation and become rancid. That means that they produce an unpleasant odor, and therefore they are used as long as their color and odor are stable. And as you can see from this diagram, lards have a consistency similar to butter. Vegetable oils are of plant origin. They give smooth and creamy consistency, and examples are olive oil, almond oil, and cottonseed oil. And silicons can be found either as solids, liquids, or semi-solids. As solids, they are found as silicon rubber, liquids, silicon oil, and semi-solids, silicon grease. And this diagram is actually what silicon oil looks like. That will be all for this video. In the next video, we are going to continue and finish the types of ointment bases.